Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. And today is not one of my rapid fire ones. This was actually a full novel that I read, and that is Orc Blood Honor by Bernard Bertram. And I keep wanting to flip the author's name around to Bertram Bernard, and I don't know why, but that's been a constant issue. Anyways, this one caught my eye for exactly one reason, in 2 words, and that is orc protagonist. I have been very vocal, maybe annoyingly so, about how much I am desperate for a high fantasy that has orcs as the good guys and elves as the bad guys. But I'll settle for any book with an orc protagonist. Now, this one wasn't quite the orc protagonist book that I had been hoping for, that I have read at least once in the past, but I did still appreciate it. This is all about an orc named Fangdar, who was raised apart from orcs by his mother, who wanted her sons, him and his half-brother, Betrayul, to grow up with a different set of morals, essentially, than the bloodthirsty, conquest at all cost mentality that most orcs operate under. And that was a pretty intriguing idea. Admittedly, I would have preferred that orcs in general weren't quite as bloodthirsty. A lot of them in this book, beyond Fangdar and his half-brother, who is only half-orc, they tend to come across very two-dimensional. They literally only want to kill and conquer, and that was kind of whatever. I would like to see orcs usually portrayed a little bit in a better light than that, because you really can't escape the fact that for most of high fantasy's history, orcs are coded as black. And that's not news. I didn't come up with that. A lot of people have said that because orcs tend to be darker skinned and have thicker lips and more coarse hair or thicker hair. Like, they're very, very coded in a certain way. So I'd love to see the dark-skinned orc equals savage and light-skinned elf equals cultured, like that myth destroyed. But regardless, this definitely reads like a more classic high fantasy tale. I did appreciate that the majority of the characters for the majority of our story are either orcs, half-orcs, or dwarves. I think dwarves tend to get a very, like, kitschy, they're only ever the sidekicks, secondary type role, and to see them be a big, like, plot point in their own right was really intriguing. I really appreciated that. Elves do pop up at one point in a variety of ways. There's only one real human character that makes that much of a dent in the story, and it bugged me a little bit because for the longest time, for the majority of the story, she's the only real, like, female character, and she's portrayed as being the weakest by far because she's the only human. Everyone else is a race that is stronger, and she's also portrayed as being very mentally and emotionally unstable. So, I'm not saying that the author intended anything, but again, it definitely felt like that classic, oh yeah, we have to have the token female in there. And honestly, I would love to see female dwarves. Like, there was no female dwarves in the story, although there were some female orcs, and, like, I would low-key love to see that. I think that that's kind of never really been addressed in most high fantasies. Most of the time, all dwarven characters are male. So, add that to my list of high fantasy things I want to see. But regardless, the crux of this story was about Fangdar, who, after some plot things happen, and they're revealed, so I won't spoil them, he returns back to the clan that his mother originally left, and essentially becomes the chieftain of it. But after some time passes, his sense of morality tends to come back in, and he realizes that he doesn't want to keep conquering like he's been doing. But he doesn't know how to keep the other orcs in line if he doesn't. So he decides that he's going to take on this dragon. That if he can prove himself strong by defeating a dragon, then he can essentially steer the orcs away from attacking humans or elves, and he'll be strong enough that they'll go along with it. That's the basic idea. I don't think his plan is going to work. I don't know that the book really tells you that his plan is going to work, but the crux of it is Fangdar wants to be a better person than he is. And I really like that aspect. Unfortunately, it was a little iffy on actual execution. While the action scenes were very much showing, and they didn't necessarily need to tell you that a character was dead, you know, you just saw what happened to them, and you're like, oh no, that's dead. the emotions was very telling, which was very strange because in one part there's some excellent writing finesse, and then in the other part it was a little bit of a struggle because the narrative would just tell you. Like, the character might say one thing or do one thing, and then you get a paragraph explaining exactly what that character's emotions are. And it left it feeling very... like, it took me a while to really, like, actually believe what the narrative told me, especially when it came to relationships. I love found family, and most of the time high fantasy can do found family pretty well because you've got a group of characters all together going on a quest, and that usually lends itself pretty well to creating relationships. But in this case, almost every relationship, with like 2 exceptions, I believe, the exception of Fangdar and his adopted father and Fangdar and his half-brother, like, all of them happen almost instantly. It'll be like within a day. These characters are cool with each other. Within 2 days, they're like really close. So it was like instant platonic love over and over and over again. And I didn't quite gel with that, especially because it talks about all of the stereotypes and stigma around orcs and dwarves. They're actually considered lesser than what are known as the quote-unquote goodly races, or rather, orcs and trolls. I think dwarves are considered goodly races. And there's a lot of that aspect. And I like the idea of that, of orcs trying to combat the negative stereotype. The problem is with that is, A, all the characters get over those long ingrained stereotypes real quick in the story. It's like, yeah, you've been raised to hate orcs or to hate dwarves, whatever, for literal years or maybe centuries, depending on the lifespan of the being, and like a couple days you're over it? No. Most media handles things like prejudice, and I guess in this way be racism, with like real black and white, like simplistic views, but that almost seemed a little bit too much. Like, yeah, this one woman who was literally trained to kill orcs gets over that real quick, like a couple days, and she's good. And that didn't quite gel with me, especially because while this whole book is talking about how people so much look down on trolls and orcs as lesser or evil races, the problem is that the narrative shows most of them to be evil races. So, like, you got Fangdar and Betrayal, who are orc and half-orc respectively, and they have a conscience, and their mother did. But no other orc is shown to have that. Every other orc in the narrative, whether it's in Fangdar's clan or otherwise, is all shown to be bloodthirsty, wanting to kill everything, kill the innocent, bathe in the blood. Like, they're not shown to have any other conscience aside from our main characters. And trolls, who are also kind of lumped in with them, same thing again. Like, trolls are often shown just, like, pillaging and killing indiscriminately. So it's like, the narrative doesn't gel because it's telling you in words that these characters are stigma and wrongly stereotyped, but then it's showing you in actions, yeah, they do all these horrible things. And it doesn't really work that well. The message is there on the surface, but the subtext does not support it, which is going back to that kind of finesse thing. And where it really does well is in the action sequences, but outside of that, the outside narrative framing struggles with the theme that it's trying to uphold a lot of cases. Also, and this is a completely random side note, there's 2 main dwarf characters, and it took me a really long period of time to be able to easily differentiate their personalities. They both talk the same way, which you would expect. They both raised in the same culture, it makes sense. But, like, I literally could not tell their personalities apart for a while, and then I finally figured out that, like, one is a slightly more somber or somber for a dwarf, and one is slightly has more focus on humor. But both dwarves are categorized as like laughing in the face of danger a lot. So it was a little bit difficult to see. There were some epic twists that I liked, but I feel like could have been set up a little bit better. One particularly involving one, I guess you could call them a side character that I liked, but I would have liked a little bit more setup. In a lot of cases, just read like a series of short stories because it was like every section would be like, okay, reset, new characters introduced, and now this is a storyline. So it didn't always have the same plot lines or felt like the same through line running through. But I think this is a great example of how to write action scenes really well, especially the scene with the dragon. Like, I think most people have a problem reading or writing intense action scenes because they can be so confusing to figure out what's going on. And in this case, it was done fairly well. You usually know, okay, this character is in this kind of peril and this character is fighting in this way and this is this character's weapons and how they use them. That was done fairly well for me. So the technical sense in the action was really well done. I just needed the narrative and the emotional weight around it to be edited a little bit more. And also, if you're going to have the trolls and orcs as wrongly stereotyped, you need to show more of their humanity, more of their good side, as opposed to like two characters and everyone else is bloodthirsty. So I did appreciate this book. I still am looking for more orc protagonists, but this one I gave 3 stars. The ideas were there, the action scenes were there, but I needed more support from the subtext for the themes and also more showing instead of telling the emotional weight of the narrative. So I am currently close to review requests still. I am getting closer and closer to being back open with every one I tackle. So here's hoping. I really like to get open by the end of February, but can't make any hard and fast promises. So with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.